Again, I do a lot of research at the beginning. I usually have some very strong scenes in my mind and can't figure out where they're going to fit. I do a lot better if I mix walking with my writing. So I'll think about, okay, the next spot I need to get to in the story. This is the next plot beat. This next thing that needs to happen to make sense. Just keep writing. If nothing else, keep writing. And it doesn't matter if you're writing to be published or you're writing for fun. Just write. It will make you feel better,
When I was 5, I lived with my mother and father and older brother.
At least I could draw, I told myself.
It was just me, my cats, and my imagination.
Created protective cover, just enough where he could keep his underwear on.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of In Other Words podcast. I'm Pam Ernest, and these are my co-hosts, Karen Sketch, Val Gale, and Jan Thorpe. And we have as our guest tonight, author A.D. Childers.
I am very happy to be here. I'm so excited.
A.D. Childers lives in Kansas, where she enjoys a life full of teaching and writing. It helps pass the time while she waits for the next Tana French novel to come out. When not at work, she can be found hiking the local trails or hanging out at the library. She lives with her wonderful and bearded husband, a grumpy cat, and her sweet Kodi-beast-dog, who is her constant snuggle companion when writing. I love that so much. Yeah, we're all big animal lovers, so.
We are. Two of my characters are 2 dogs.
Oh, excellent. That's the best.
Do you have, you can give us the precipice of like what you try to write and do you have like animal characters? Well, I always have cats in mind. What kind of inspiration do you draw? How do you come up with ideas? I have people ask me that a lot. How do you come up with ideas? And I'm like, well, people are going to find out I'm a fraud.
Well,
just make things up.
Yeah, right. I just get ideas just everyday kind of situations. You're walking around, you talk to people, they'll tell you stories. You just have to kind of keep your ear open. You see things and you think, oh my gosh, there's a story. And I wrote this down. I haven't used it in a book yet, but I was driving somewhere and I was at a stop sign and I could see across the way there's this bus stop and this guy comes off and he has like a suit in a bag over his shoulder and he's going one way and this tiny little dog comes off and is following him. And then this little lady comes off and it's her dog, but the dog is like completely going and she's trying to catch it and she can't catch it. And then he stops and sees what's happening, is confused and steps on the leash. And then she grabs the dog and starts going the other way. And it was just this comic little reaction there. And so I wrote that down. Like, where will I use that? I don't know. Right. But I could use it anywhere. So just, I get ideas. My problem is almost more deciding what ideas are worth is maybe not the right word, but has enough meat on it to pursue. And then I have to decide, is this for short stories? Because I do sometimes write short fiction as well. Or is this a big enough idea to be a novel? Sometimes I compare it to like getting a cold. Sometimes you get a head cold and it's very quick and it passes by. I get lots of ideas like that. The ones that kind of settle in your chest and won't let go, those are the ones I end up writing and focusing on for a full novel length work.
Yeah. I mean, those little moments that you don't know if you can use them or not, but they're stored, in your brain, right there. It's almost like we can draw on a lot of that, when we're writing and then suddenly you're writing about something and people say, where'd you get that idea? I just saw that happen. Or, I know about that. It's not thin air exactly. But so, and I think writers all do that. We all do it. And it's a sort of a curiosity to people who don't write. Mm-hmm. You do that.
Yeah, it's just collecting little pieces all along.
Those little pieces that happen. Yeah.
And then sometimes taking your story, like a lot of times I won't even know what I'm doing. I'll just try to do a moment. And then as I'm doing that moment, something else naturally would be something that would happen in that moment. And then you go off on that tangent and go with that and then try to tie it into something else. Yeah. So I really by the seat of my pants. I mean, do you write that way as well? Do you have an outline? Do you just do it?
I'm a weird I'm a planster, I guess. I do not have a firm outline. I have kind of my inciting incident. I have some scenes that are sticking in my mind. I have a direction I want to go. But I do a lot of research before I start writing.
Yeah, I do too.
Sometimes months of reading things. So by the time I go to write, I have plenty of things to pull from. So wherever, because you get in there and the characters start doing their own thing, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm just along for the ride now. I'm just recording what y'all are doing. So I have kind of fill my mind with enough information that I can handle that when they do whatever they decide to do for me. So.
Yeah, the research is such a big part of it. I find as I'm writing, I get lost I'll throw in something that I didn't even know I was going to throw in. And then I realize, then I have to go research it. And you can spend days and, I buy books on it, etc. So it really takes you on a long, writing is a long journey. And then, you can spend a whole day researching for just one sentence.
Oh yeah, to make sure that's accurate.
Oh yeah.
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 Writers are a lot of times also like lifelong learners though. So I think we enjoy that aspect of it.
We do.
Well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you tell us about your book, what inspired it?
So the switch point was kind of, I don't think I was quite having a midlife crisis yet because I wasn't that old yet, but I was thinking about some of the things that I had experienced as a teenager, and now as an adult, I could reflect back and I understood them different. And I think especially being a teacher where I work with high schoolers, I would see them going through similar things. And I was thinking, I remember the first time I heard someone say things like that or do things like that and whatnot, and how I was shocked or didn't know what to do. And now I'm like, oh, okay, teenagers do that, and that kind of experience and whatnot. But then there's other things that really were the opposite. Like as a teenager, I didn't realize how scary or ugly some things were because I was just in my little kid life still. So when I went to write this, I wanted to write a story that reflected on how the person we were when we were younger doesn't ever leave us, but it's moved into something new, and that reflection and kind of understanding how we've grown and how we've changed. I think with my main character Kenan, my biggest issue with him was that he hadn't bothered to reflect. He hadn't bothered to change. So I'm like, okay, well, what if I make him do this? What if I have the producers force him to go back to his hometown and investigate the death of his friend that he had kind of just tried to block out? So that's kind of, I guess, where that came from for that one.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So can you kind of give us an idea? Can you tell us a little blurb about your book?
So Kenan he's on an investigative streaming show, kind of like Unsolved Mysteries, that sort of thing. But the thing the show really focuses on is digging into stories that have a paranormal story attached to them, some sort of myth or local legend attached to them. So he finds out that there's this wailing woman on the tracks that's been attached to the death of his friend Leonie, who was killed at the tracks. And so the producers are like, this is going to be perfect. It's your history. It's going to make us big bucks. Go. He really doesn't want to, but finds out that he doesn't have much choice in the matter. So he goes on to do this. And so I tell the story. It switches back and forth between timelines, between the current investigation and then his senior year of high school leading up to Leonie's death. So it jumps back and forth between those two things while he's trying to figure out what really happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in the paranormal aspect of that because I'm all about that part.
Yes, I've heard. I'm excited to see some of your things on paranormal because I had some people who were pulled into paranormal, some that were more pulled into the mystery. I think in both the book that I currently have with my publisher and then the one I've just started working on, the paranormal in both of those is becoming more solidified. That's something more I think I'm going to pull in more. And that's one of those things in like Tana French's books that they can stand without it. Like there's a perfectly strong plot without the paranormal, but it just makes you go, wait a minute. a little bit more, that addition of it. And so I love that in her style, and not that I can ever get anywhere close to her level, but she does inspire me to think along those lines.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what was your writing process like for this particular project? Do you have a specific routine that you follow?
I feel like my routine is becoming more solidified. That for that my first one, it was kind of all over the place. I guess I shouldn't necessarily say it's my first one. There's 2 full-length novel drafts of different stories that I tried before that I were practice. They were not very good. They're in drawers. But with this one, I had started to kind of figure out what works for me. So again, I do a lot of research at the beginning. I usually have some very strong scenes in my mind and can't figure out where they're going to fit. I find that I do a lot better if I mix walking with my writing. So I'll think about like, okay, the next spot I need to get to in the story. This is the next plot beat. This next thing that needs to happen to make sense. How do I get there? So I'll go walk in the woods, and I won't even be actively thinking about it.
Mhm.
But by the time I get out of the woods, like they're just having in the back of my mind and just being present for a little bit, by the time I come out, my brain has figured it out. I have some good ideas, some good insights, things I hadn't thought of before to tie it together. And then I come back and write it. I handwrite everything first because I'm weird.
I used to do that. Yeah.
It's just, I think it's the pacing that my brain works at. I can type faster than I can think, unfortunately. Sure. And so it works better when I'm writing. So I write it out, and then I go to the computer and I type it out, and can't work back and forth that way through the draft. I always listen to my drafts all the way through, because I hear things different. I have a writing group that I work with, and we read our pieces to each other. So that's super beneficial. Then I kind of, from there on, get beta readers and then send it to the publisher, and they get me editors from there and that sort of thing. So
Nice.
Now, how did you get a publisher?
Well, the way most things worked out, I happen to know somebody. Another group I'm a part of, Kansas Writers Inc. here. It's called Kansas Writers Inc., but we're kind of central to Topeka here. She wrote a lot of mysteries, and she had found this publisher because she had landed an editor who was an acquiring editor for this publisher. And so she got with it, and she's like, well, they take direct submissions. You write really similar to what I'm writing. I think you should submit. And I had honestly pretty much given up on this book. I had spent a year querying agents, querying publishers, that sort of thing, getting the rejection letters piled up. And this was like at the year, I was like, maybe this one's still just not quite good enough. Maybe I should shelve it. And she's like, well, try it. And they took it. So they've been very nice to work with. They're a smaller publisher. They're actually in Japan. But they've got me, an editor. They organize the cover art, that kind of thing. They do promotions, nothing like over the top, but they run sales and things like that. They've got me on some platforms that I didn't even really know existed out there. The book's done really well in Australia and Canada because their platform sends out there pretty well. It actually hit top 10 in, I think, Ghost Mysteries in both of those places on Amazon for a short while it was on sale, which was exciting. So they had a platform and whatnot. And so they've gotten me into some places that I wouldn't have known to even look for readers.
Right.
Yeah, a guy who has a bookstore up in Kansas City. And he was saying that there's actually thrillers are a major genre in Australia and New Zealand. Like that's the most popular genre there. I'm like, I wouldn't have known that, but it's doing really well over there. And, so I wanted to market that direction and whatnot. So
Great.
yeah, I've been very lucky and very happy.
Great.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that is wonderful. Yeah.
Do you do young adult novels then?
I feel like my books I don't know if my books are necessarily aimed at young adults. They definitely could be comfortably read by young adults or adults. because I've had some people read it and they're like, yeah, this feels like young adult. And I've had some other people read it and be like, no, this feels like a regular, So it's kind of, I would say I write for, I don't want to say like more mature readers, because I think even younger teenagers could probably still read it. I wouldn't say it's for younger kids, but yeah, YA and up. I would say most of my readers have been adults, though, from feedback and from reviews I've gotten and things like that.
Yeah, I like writing adult fiction more than young adult, because you can have fleshy stuff in there, and you have to be careful when it's younger, adult. But but you also remember when, we were 16, 17, 18, we were reading things we weren't supposed to be reading. Everybody's done that, but you still have to be careful, with that kind of stuff for sure,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the other side of that is I think there are a lot of adult readers who really like what comes out in the young adult genre and read a lot of things that are marketed as young adult. And, sometimes they're a little shy about it, but they love them. They get really into some of these series and whatnot. I'm like, hey, if you like it, read it,
Absolutely. We have signs in our library, in the YA section saying, come on over and check it out, because to read wherever you want.
Now, a lot of adults read Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Did you grow up reading Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, or what was your big inspiration
kind
for?
of. What was it? It was Trixie Belden.
Trixie Belden, yes.
Yes. When I was a little kid, so Childers is actually my grandmother's maiden name. And I took that on because the last person with that name alive, or this male with that name alive, is my great uncle, and he's turning 89 in about a month. So there's no other male Childers to keep the name going, and I wanted to keep the name going. But my grandmother always took me to the library, and I snuck out of the picture book section. I got over into the chapter books, and I found a Trixie Belden book. And I said, Grandma, this sounds really good. Would you read it to me? She says, sure, because she loved mysteries as well. And I had somehow managed to pick up the first one. And we read all the way through that series. We read until it got to the point where I could start reading as well, and we'd switch chapters back and forth. That was just something we did every summer. And I loved those. We had Nancy Drew in the house. We had Hardy Boys in the house. My mom and my uncle had both read all of those. But I guess these were a little bit more special because this was just me and Grandma. So
that's cool.
That's nice.
Yeah, I loved Trixie Belden. Bobbsey Twins were good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of those.
How do you feel about representation in your books for different diverse voices and stuff like that? How do you feel about the kind of characters that you depict? You said you're going to have a gay character in your next novel. What about people, disabilities? I'm trying to, actually my fourth novel, I'm trying to get people with disabilities. I'm trying to get people of color, and stuff like that, to have a broader umbrella under the spectrum.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I try to think about as I'm writing out my books. I mean, a lot of times when I'm envisioning my characters, they kind of naturally come somewhat diverse, because I work in a school that's very diverse,
Right.
a town that's pretty diverse. And so in my daily life, that's what I see, right? And so I try to emulate that. But at the same time, I mean, my first main character is a male character, and I'm a female, but there are some lines I wonder as far as main character, as far as like authentic voices and true voices. So I try really hard to make sure I'm capturing experiences authentically. I have conversations with people. I'll ask them specifically. Sometimes when I'm looking for my beta readers, I'm like, will you make sure I'm not sounding like a jerk or doing something dumb here that I don't realize, because I'm a white lady and I have a lot of privilege with that. And so I don't always know everything that everyone's going through, or different perspectives and that kind of thing. So I try to be cognizant about it. I don't think I probably do it perfectly by any means, because like I said, I do have my lived experience. Is what I'm writing from. But so, yeah, for my next book, the main character is asexual. So I've tried to read some books on that. It was kind of interesting to me. We have an amazing library here, but there's a great LGBTQ section, but for the ACE section was kind of slim. And as I was looking out, just trying to find books, I'm like, there's not a lot out there published yet. I found some good TikTokers to follow and kind of make sure I was getting that voice and that experience right. I was very lucky to have, I have some students who are very, just very kind and will let me bounce ideas off of them. I'll be like, hey, I'm writing a character with this perspective. You know, I know that student has that same perspective. Did I say that okay? And they'll tell you, right? They'll be like, no mistakes.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah. Or they'll be like, good job, Miss Davis. Like they want to help too. So it's just, I think one of the great things has been some of the conversations that's come out from that I didn't think about when I started writing, that it would help me, how many ways it would help me maybe get closer to people and better understand the people around me.
That's great.
Yeah. And that's one of the challenges writing. If you're, I tried to do a short piece on a scammer. I was actually scammed and I wanted to do it. And I did a lot of research, but the scammer had a Punjabi accent. And I couldn't speak it. I was trying to read it out loud it was impossible. But because it's you have to get that accent right. So that's still in the drawer right now, but who knows? Maybe at some point I'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know that some authors that I've spoken with about, they feel like if they're not like a trans person, they shouldn't write about trans people, and I have a whole different take on that. I'm all about, for me, honestly, the human experience, and anybody can write about the human experience. And I think if you're doing it authentically and trying to be kind to people, then it's okay. Mm-hmm. Just so happens that I am trans, and that I live that life and that I know a lot of stuff about that. But, it's just crazy at 56 now that I see all this literature, all these movies, all this stuff out, and there was nothing when I was growing up, nothing, and so I think it's really wonderful. And the young kids, because I have a lot of young kids, 20 to 30-year-old, they're young to me, read my work, and they are just so welcoming.
Yeah.
They really, really are. And it just shows that there's a lot of evolving going on, in the underground communities and stuff like that too. So, I think it's important what you have to say too, as well. Just because you don't live that life doesn't mean, but I like that you interview. I do that too. I've interviewed people, that have had full reassignment surgeries and stuff like that. I've talked to people about, because it is important, because I don't know, so I think that's great that you do that.
Yeah. And Val, you do that. I mean, you're very generous at telling people about trans, and that, I've really appreciated that, because, living in California, you got to be careful what you say or what you know or what you don't know and how you phrase things. You were very open about it. So, it really helps. Yeah.
Well, I live in a red state, too.
You live in a red state.
It's like, I don't care, I'll just say, I'm just like, people, I like when people try to ask and learn about stuff than just to be hateful. Isn't that what we're all supposed to be doing?
Well, I mean, really, one would think,
but yes, thank you, Jan. I just want to write about the human condition too. And white women and white men are part of that condition as well. People forget sometimes, I think, so, like you've asked me about my parents and how they were. And I was lucky that my parents didn't kick me out in the 1980s. My parents, they kind of thought it out, grow it.
Yeah.
But my parents were totally, boomer, pre-boomer, 1930s. That stuff wasn't, but they learned to, love me. And I guess what I'm saying is anybody is capable of loving and understanding. And that's what I'm trying to do with my books as well, is open up people that maybe don't understand that and give them some insight.
That's what's so important about those stories, is because people don't know, right? It has not been the main narrative. And so they're scared or they don't understand. And all they need to do is hear the stories. And like you
Right.
said, the human experience is the same, and they just need to see that, right? In many cases. So that's where those stories are so powerful and world changing. So.
It is. That's what we try to really, we try to make people aware. We want to make sure that there's books that are from every viewpoint that we can get.
Sure.
That way, you know, even if you're not living that experience, you can read it. And that's what we're talking about here, how important it is. And just to get to maybe not be able to see everything from their perspective, but just kind of get into the story and walk around in their shoes for at least a moment, you know, and maybe not be so scared of that situation if you're coming from of the unknown. I think it's really important.
Right. And it's and what you find out is we all bleed the same color. All of our experiences really are the same. If you just switch around chess pieces, I mean, seriously, love really is love. I know that's kind of people are, but it really is. When people who are in love, it doesn't really matter. It's all the same issues that you would have with the people that are in love. It's the same thing. So that's what I try to emulate as well, and, you know, give hope in my novels. And I think that's important, especially for young people now in this climate and everything that's going on. I think that hope is so important.
Yes, it is.
Alicia, I wanted to ask you, what grade level do you teach?
I teach high school, so I have 9th grade, 10th grade, and then I have a senior AP Lit and Comp class, which is for dual credit through the university here in town.
Great. And do your students read?
You know, I definitely have kids who are readers. That because my second home on campus is the library, and when I go in there, there's this little wave of "Hey, Miss Davis," because those are kids that are there as well, which I love. There are kids who are reluctant readers. There's kids who have never really found a book that they like, but we try really hard, especially in the regular English classes, to have at least one YA novel in the curriculum. And a lot of times that's the one where the kids go, oh, I actually kind of like this. And so, or, you know, other high interest ones. And so most of the kids will attempt, you know, even if they're not, I don't know that I've ever convinced anyone to become like a solid reader. But the kids will try to read, whatnot. I have a lot of kids who read graphic novels now, which is really cool because it's kids who before would not read go, okay, this is something. Yeah. We actually teach To Kill a Mockingbird with the graphic novel version.
That's great.
Oh my God. Yeah, the kids buy into it really well. It's very well done. And it really does help struggling readers a lot, because a lot of times the things struggling readers struggle with is envisioning the scene. I don't know about you guys, but when I read, there's a movie playing in my head, and that's not true for
mine
everybody.
too.
So for those kids where that doesn't happen, to have that visual there, suddenly they're like, oh, this is why people like reading. This is fun, you know? And so including that has made a big difference as well, I would say.
It's funny that you mentioned Kill a Mockingbird graphic novel. We have that in our library, and we do have parents that are like, no, why don't you pick a real book and not a graphic novel? Don't pick a cartoon, a comic.
Too bad.
Hang on, you know. And that's the one we always pull and say, okay, look at this, and it really helps to kind of and that it's not just a comic book. It's like you said, it helps you envision the story. People can't always envision for themselves.
Right.
I love them.
Yeah, I think they're fun. I've read a couple that are just, it's a different sort of reading for me. It actually probably takes me maybe a little bit longer because it's not a form I'm used to.
It takes me longer too.
Yeah, but I do enjoy it. I'm in a book club at one of the local bookstores, and every once in a while they'll pick a graphic novel for her, and some of the members are like, I'm like, no, this is good for us. This is good for us. And I've always everyone we've had has been good. So
they're great.
Yeah. I'm surprised you have access to it. I'm getting a shirt made that says "Ban my book, please." I'm surprised that you can, still read. have access to some of that, honestly. I mean, growing up in, high school and college, we read Huckleberry Finn, To Kill a Mockingbird, and, all those Pride and Prejudice, all those and stuff that you have a hard time, uh, getting access to for many, many reasons. That's interesting.
We still do the in our library, we want to, and most other libraries do this too. We want to have something that offends everyone.
Yes.
That's what a library should do.
Absolutely. So when you're writing this particular book, were there any scenes or chapters that ended up being difficult to write, or maybe ones that were rewarding to write?
Yes, there's one, and I won't say too much about it because it gives a little bit of spoilers because it's towards the end, and it has to do with Leonie's passing. The original drafts did not have that happening in real time. It was always just talked about. It was talked about. And as I got towards the end, I realized I was like, I'm kind of pulling my punches by always just talking about it. Like, the reader needs to know what happened. And I think I just didn't really want to have to write it because it was sad and it was tragic. And I loved Leonie. I started out with the book understanding that she had already died, right? When I started with the story, you find that out at the beginning. That's who he's investigating.
Mm-hmm.
But, at the same time, I was writing her as a teenager and whatnot. I didn't really want to have to write that scene. And so it was one of my final drafts, I wrote it out and I took it to my writers group and I said, I don't know if this is what I've done here. Is this too much? I said, it was really hard to write. And I actually took it to two different groups and both groups were like, no, this is what it was needing. Okay, fine. But it was, and I think in my second one that, like I said, is still in production, I was a little bit more brave. I was a little more realized a little bit more that, I'm going to have to dig into some of those scenes that are upsetting, but it's good because, again, kind of coming back to authentic voice, authentic experiences, I need to talk it like a human is there and going through these things. So, I guess that was probably the most challenging. As far as rewarding, again, kind of, I don't want to give away spoilers, but a person who I didn't think would come back in the end when I first wrote the book did come back and had a part to play, and that gave me a lot more closure because in the first drafts that wasn't happening, and I was feeling, it's like, man, this is just sad. It just keeps getting sadder. There's no emotional arc. It's just bleh. And so with that person being able to come back and have some agency at the end of the story, that was rewarding. It felt better. So.
Cool.
Did you have to compromise any of your manuscript for your publisher? When I first started querying agents, I queried 600 agents, and it was insane. And I almost was signed in 2022, and they wanted me to compromise some of the work. And and I was willing to do some of it, but some of it I couldn't. Have you run into that, having to compromise some of?
I have. I've been lucky that I have not. My publisher is more of, in some ways, they're kind of hands off in that way. They're like, hey, we'll take your book, we'll get it out there, So I mean, mostly what I had as far as edits were mostly line edits. There was one or two things where it's like, this phrase is a little weird here or something. But it wasn't content. There was no arguments over content. So I've been very lucky that I haven't had any pushback there.
What are some new novel ideas you think you're gonna come up with? Are you working on anything at the moment?
I am. So like the stars aligned and everything. This could have been better. So I had this idea about a dig. I'm setting it in Kansas, an archaeological dig, where they find this estate of this family that kind of turned into myth. Like, people didn't really think they had been there. It was this famously rich people before the state really became a state, and it had burnt down, and everyone thought it was just like a local tall tale. Well, they find the the foundations of this large barn and this large house and about the right area. But among them, they find a small kind of cemetery. And then a ways off, they find this other very peculiar grave. There's some strange things in the way that that grave was prepared and buried. And it's just very strange. So they bring in my main character, which has a job that I didn't know existed before I started researching it. So I've been reading, I just finished a giant book on archaeothanatology. Big word. Basically, it's an archaeologist who focuses on funerary practices and death practices. So she comes in to try and figure out who is this person and why were they buried in this way, that sort of thing. And then, I already had this idea. I've been researching. I found this great publication of a diary from a lady in the 1880s that she wrote from her like teens up through her adulthood. So I'm using that as like a sample for language and whatnot, because I think I'm going to have the modern timeline, and then I'm going to have like diary entries from the timeline that the dig was originally from, like their present time. And the Kansas Archaeological Training Program this year is digging up a Stanton estate, which is a stone building from around the settlement of the state. And so I have signed up to work on that. I'm doing lab work. I tried digging one year. I did the field work, and I'm like, oh,
it's tough.
This is so hard work. I want to go, and I did some digging and did some lab, and I'm like, okay, I'm a lab person. Give me the dirty stuff. I'll clean it up. I'll label it and that kind of thing. So I have that coming up here in a couple weeks, and I am so excited because it could not have lined up better with what my research is. It's a silly thing, but it almost makes me feel like, oh, I picked the right thing to write about. The world is telling me, the universe is saying,
the synchronicity.
So,
yes,
the synchronicity of writing can happen. My second book is, I use a lot of background Civil War. It takes place in here and now, but the idea to have one of the main characters be a ghost from the Civil War was walking in a cemetery. I think it was in Maryland. It was near Antietam, and the graves were pre-Civil War, a lot of them. But just then the idea, God, there must got to be ghosts here or there. And of course, the Civil War, produced more ghost stories than I think any other war. And I did a lot of research on that. But again, as you say, it all kind of falls in line as if, oh, I'm meant to do this.
Yeah.
This is gonna. I got this story. I got this.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, how perfect is that?
Right? I couldn't hardly believe it. I was like, really?
God, that is so cool.
Yeah.
I think you're definitely given a gift from the universe, and you should run with that. I mean, that's crazy good. I know.
It sounds. I mean, I'm ready to read it now. I'm looking forward to it.
I have like 2 chapters written so far. But I'm very excited. Like that's my plan for this summer.
That's great.
That I can take my teacher hat off and put my writing hat on during the summer, and I go over to my public library and write. There's a wonderful place up in St. Joe, Missouri. It is the Albrecht Kemper Museum of Art. I went up there again, just trying to find some stories and whatnot. And this wonderful lady, B, who was working at the front counter, she teaches art classes there. We just started talking and talking and talking. And in the downstairs of this art museum, they have this beautiful art library. It's got all these dark green walls and creepy little notes carved into the wood and that kind of thing. And then there's like a tiny little speakeasy off of it, like this little hidden off of it. It's so cool. And I told her, I was like, man, that would be a great place to write. And she's like, well, you should do that. Like, you're a teacher, you can get a $10 yearly membership. I'm like, really?
Wow.
And so, yeah. So that's another thing I'll do in my process. I'll have a prompt, so I'll drive up to St. Joe. It's about an hour and a half for me. And then I'll talk to B for a while, and I'll go down to the basement. The internet doesn't reach down there. So sometimes that's good for me if I'm having like lots of, little going down. And I'll just go down there and I'll write. Every so often a patron will come through. I'm like, hey, come on, I'm just writing. You can look at everything. I'm not part of the exhibit. Don't mind me. and that has been so fun. And I've got to know a lot of the people that work there at the museum. They're just so wonderful and friendly. So again, that's one of those wonderful things about writing, that you take those chances and just say, hey, I'm writing something. Is it okay if I talk to you about this, or if I hang out here and write? And people are like, well, okay, sure. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's true. It's true when you tell people you write stories and stuff. Almost nobody's not interested. I mean, everybody. Oh, what do you write? It's always a positive. Yeah. So,
and then they, like I said, then they bring you stories. They're like, oh,
they bring you stories.
Oh, I have a story. Yeah.
I've been asked to be a ghost writer. I don't know how many times. I'm like,
That's
Yeah.
And even I have to say, honestly, even with some of the content, I write, especially like I said, in this climate, sometimes I have to be careful with people that I say things to. It's just the reality of it. But even telling people what I write, they're like, oh, really? That's interesting. Now, I don't know how genuine they're really being to my face and behind, but I'm just saying, that people are interested.
They really are.
I think they are.
Yeah. And they want to know. And then they'll say, oh, I know somebody that has a son or daughter like that, or, and it really, and I was telling Jan, because I hate marketing too. Hate it. I suck at it. I hate it. But I've been having a lot of luck just with good old fashioned grassroots. And it sounds like you are too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, one of the funny things, I went to a 1-year-old's birthday party for some of my friends, and their neighbor was there, and I got to talking. She's like, your book sounds great. Can I buy one? So I sold her one. She proceeded to buy, I think, maybe now up to 10 copies to gift to friends. Yeah. And then she, again, bringing you a story, she came and she said, well, I have this interesting story about my grandfather. He died in Wichita, but I don't know much about it. I had somebody write up about it before, but I've lost it. Would you look into it? And I'm like, I have like nonfiction is not my realm, but I was like, I'll try. I'll see what happens. And it was so wonderful for me because I got so many research skills. I found out that through the Kansas History Museum, or Historical Society, excuse me, as long as you have a Kansas driver's license, you can have access to these digitized newspapers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was searching for her name and finding all these names and finding all the stories and things like that. So I was able to write her up something on it and get her a lot of screenshots. I found out that one of the articles is actually here in the archives at the Kansas Historical Museum. She didn't realize that. So like that, and that experience of trying something completely outside of where I'm really comfortable writing really pushed me a lot, because I needed to be very true to the story, because it was nonfiction. This happened to people. So it really, like I said, it was a wonderful experience that just came out of talking to a lady at a birthday party over cupcakes. Right? So
yeah,
what will happen.
It's amazing how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
The story that you're writing, how do you know when it's finished? And how do you know when it's ready to share with the world?
I'm really quite terrible at endings. I have found that's the hardest thing for me to write. So figuring out when I'm finished is a little tricky. I usually get an ending in there and I'm like, I'll come back to that. And so, but the main thing is for me is to write to the ending, because then I can go back and make it look like I knew what was happening.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And so I was doing this all along. I saw this ending and
yeah.
Right. And one of the things I've been really proud of with this book is that a lot of people had said that I've got them. They're like, I usually figure out the ending and I did not have the ending figured out. I'm like, that's because I didn't either. But when I went back, right, I started thinking, well, wait a minute, this could happen. Wait, this could happen. And that helped me kind of redo that ending. Again, I lean on my writing groups a lot. My weekly writing group sees pretty much everything I write. And I think it's pretty much true for most people in the group. We bring everything through. We take turns every week. I think there's 6 of us now altogether. So we take turns with that. But, they'll tell me like, this is working or this isn't working. And so I can, I'll go back and rewrite it and refresh it. And so, I guess in some ways I share maybe earlier than most writers think is necessarily good because with that writing group, but I'm just so lucky to have them because they are a trusted team. And we know each other. Honestly, the group's been really successful. Jen Haskins has been published for quite a while. Zach Drummond just got a publishing contract. Mark McGinnis has self-published some books. Rakai Karakurt has self-published books. So like when we all started, only one person was published.
Huh.
And so we've really,
that's fantastic.
Who's just joined us in the last year or so, but I'm sure he will get there as well. So it has been having that regular feedback of this is working, this is not working, help that growth curve of figuring out where I am in the story, what works as a story. Like it just, if I kept it all to myself all the way to the end, I wouldn't have grown as quick as I was bouncing ideas. But you have to be careful because I hear so many horror stories of people trying to share with groups and then they get so much feedback and they're like,
oh yeah, no, I had a client who got just, she was in a writing group and just got torn apart, and it took her years to finally get back into a writing group. Now she's in a really good one, sounds like yours, and she's publishing, and she does a lot of short story stuff and she's getting published, but it took years for her to get over that. And that was a lot of what our therapy was about, just get back in.
A good writing group is a support group, and you talk about everything in your lives as well, and you become close friends. And I think if I came to this group later, but the two people, Zach and Jen, who kind of started this group, did that because they had been in a group that had turned pretty toxic. And so they left that group, but wanted to keep writing. And so they found their own people, and it's been wonderful.
It's such an important part of the writing process is to have that group of people you trust. And then you can say pretty much anything to each other.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you do like for writer's block? Like and it really is a real thing. Like people ask me, do you have phantom pain? I'm like, yes, yes. And writer's block. Yes, it's a real thing, and
it is.
I use a lot of for me, I use music lyrics. I love music. I listen to music constantly, all day, every day. Movies, going out in nature, watching people walk around, interact with each other, watch animals interact with each other, be out in nature. And then I pull from stuff like that when I'm having writer's blocks. What do you kind of do to come up out of it?
Really, really similar. Like going out walking is, I do that even when I'm not having a writer's block, but it will help.
Yep, me too.
Music. My first career was actually a music teacher before I switched to teaching English. So music is very important to me. I will build, tracks and lists and whatnot that have the right mood to fit with what I'm writing. Sometimes I'll go and watch a movie or a show that's in the same genre to get kind of ideas. I'm like, okay, well, what did they do when they were in this castle? How did they get moving? That I find movies and TV shows, I try and write very visually. So kind of I can use their storytelling tricks. I'm like, oh, look how they slowed down the pacing and zoomed in here. Maybe that's just what I need to do, right? And so I can try to translate some of those over. One of the coolest things, I'm a teaching consultant with the Flint Hills Writing Project, which is one of the Kansas chapters of the National Writing Project. And some wonderful people who lead it, Roger and Heather Caswell, they will organize what they call writing marathons. And we will go somewhere and you'll just write all day and you'll write in place about what you see and what's going on around you. This 10-year anniversary, so they did 10 different writing marathons this year.
Wow.
So it was amazing. I didn't make it to all of them, but I went to one. We went up to K-State for one and just wandered around campus. And that's where this chapter really started. So we learned about that and just hung out with writers all day and wrote stuff. And we have what's called author's chair at the end of that, where you can share a few lines or whatever, and there's no feedback or criticism. We just celebrate what everyone wrote that day. So it's very writer positive. The funnest one for me was we went on a train trip from Kansas City to Herman, Missouri. So we rode on the train, and then we spent like 2 days in Herman just wandering around. We stayed in this really neat older hotel that had a lot of character. And, we'd go to a coffee shop and write, and then we'd go to a winery and write, and then we'd go to a restaurant, or we'd stop to shop here. And, oh, look, they have a shop cat. Let's write about the cat, and people would bounce ideas. It was just like this wonderfully, like the most healthy writer place you could be, like, right. And again, it was a group of about 8 people that were very like-minded, all educators, all writers. Well, my husband was with us, and he's not an educator, but he played along very nicely with us.
So that's all that matters.
Right. So sometimes doing that, just getting out of my house and going somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of editing at my house, but I don't do a lot of story construction at my house. Actually, you guys were talking about Marsh. Marsh has so kindly set me up a recliner in their little writing area at their house. If I need to get out, I can go sit over there, pet a cat for a bit, and get some writing. So, yeah.
I love that you talked about Herman too. I mean, St. Louis is amazing, but Herman, the atmosphere, the whole town is just really, really so cool.
Yeah, everyone was so neat and so nice. Again, like just those interactions with all those people, you gather so many things that you can then use in your story,
So what do you have coming up? Like you said, you're talking about this novel that you're 2 chapters in, and what are some of your social media platforms? Where can people buy your book? Where all that good stuff?
Yeah, so my book is on a lot of platforms. I actually have a universal book link that goes to platforms like I said, didn't know exist, but Amazon, Kobo, pretty much. I mean, most anywhere where a book is sold. Barnes and Noble, I've done a thing there. The local bookstore here has let me host book things, events there. Actually, my first book signing I got to host at my high school, which was really special. They let me host it there at school, and Roundtable Bookstore came in and sold the book for me while we did it. And people who I work with made little muffins and treats and coffee, and it was, oh my gosh, it was so fun. As far as social media, my main platform is TikTok. I have an AD Children's account on TikTok, and I do a weekly favorite line Friday, and I just share a line from something I've been reading, where it's research or something I'm reading for my book club. Sometimes it's been lines I've written. I've on occasion, I think, even shared lines for my students. I was asked for permission for that sort of thing. But it's just something that I've read that I was like, ooh, I like that. So that's been kind of my main platform as far as trying to getting into book talk and that kind of thing.
I follow you on there, and those quotes are the best.
Oh, thank you.
They're
so fun. I was like, I need something low stress that I can put out regularly, and so.
Oh yeah,
that's a really good idea, actually.
Yeah, very good. And on TikTok, how do you find what do I look up?
I think it's AD Childers 42.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But it also helps me, like, it gives me a platform to celebrate my other friends who are authors. As I read their books, I'm like, hey, check this out, and this is a cool line. So I've really liked that because I just know so many great writers, and it's great to be able to put them out there in some way.
I love how everybody thinks Kansas is just, there's nothing here.
Oh, it's the same with Iowa too, Pam. Same thing. It's the Midwest. People think, and there's a lot.
It's so exciting to see, all of this is going on, and to be able to share it with everybody.
Yeah, well, I think that I think that's true. That people out here in California think that we've got it all out here, and but I'm finding, wow, you guys, the most interesting people I'm finding out about are from out in the Midwest.
Right?
Nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fell for that thinking as well when I was young. I grew up in Emporia, Kansas, which is the hometown of William Allen White, right? Like major literary figure. But still in my mind, writers lived on the coast.
Yeah.
And so it took me a long time to be like, no, this is people are doing this here and kind of find the communities.
I think that's right. And isn't the Iowa's writers group? It's in Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Iowa, I thought about maybe trying to, try to do that, but I've set the bar really, really high. I do Lambda. Lambda's more of my focus that I'm trying to get in, that I've been rejected 5 times and counting. It's all good. I mean, it's all good. It's all part of it. But yeah, Iowa Writers is a very, very prestigious organization at the University of Iowa. Yes, for sure.
That's very cool. And one thing I do want to talk about too, you were chosen for the 2025 Kansas Notable Books. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that was an exciting surprise because apparently, I don't know if I typed my email in wrong or what, but they couldn't get hold of me. So they actually contacted my publisher. My publisher was like, hey, these people are trying to contact you about what this thing.
Wow.
So that was kind of, I don't know, it was crazy. I became aware of it a couple years ago. I've been going to the Kansas Book Festival that's hosted. Previously, it was hosted in Topeka at the Capitol building, and now it's hosted at Washburn University. And they awarded this the night before. And so I was aware of it, and I had some friends in town, or really at Topeka West, and they were like, hey, you should think about putting your book in there. And I think I had to send in like 2 copies of my book. And so I was like, okay, it's just 2 copies. It's I'm not losing out too much. And I really didn't think much would come of it because I know some of the previous winners. There are some New York Times bestselling authors in this area who have been winners. So I was like, well, I can just say, I put into it. So I was really surprised when I got it because I guess it's a team that narrows it down to 25 books. And then they pass that on to the state librarian who picks the final 15. And they can be from any genre, any age group. So it is wide. So it was very, very exciting. And I'm very honored to be part of the group.
Amazing.
You were in with some really good authors on here too. So yeah, that's incredible. Congratulations on that.
Yes, congratulations.
We're excited for you.
Thank you.
What advice, as we're winding down here, what advice would you give a young person, especially being a teacher, and a mentor like that? What advice would you give a young person that wants to pursue being a writer or, anywhere in the, in the arts where you start first and then,
Well, some of the things I do at Topeka West, I host a NaNoWriMo club in November, and I'm very lucky that our kind of local NaNoWriMo lady, Lisa Staley, she works at the library, and her child goes to school there. They come over and help out, kind of get that going. So the first thing is I was like, kids, you got to write. You can't just say you're a writer. You got to put down ideas. You got to keep trying. And then kind of the opposite side of that is in April, we come back together for a writer's workshop. And these are just after school in the library for an hour and a half. We bring snacks. In the writer's workshop, they bring things to be critiqued. So the first time is just getting things down. And then April, we come back together like, well, let's give each other some feedback. And I found that has really helped the kids because they have a structure and time. There's goals to be made. And I think that's the biggest thing is actually setting some goals. For me, while I was a music teacher, I was still writing, but I wasn't doing it regularly. It was here and there. And so getting into writing groups started holding me accountable. I'm like, okay, well, I'm supposed to have something for next week and things like that. So finding, and I'll do this to my students as well. I'll tell them like like they're working on paper or project. I'm like, find an accountability buddy. Tell them where you're at, tell them where you're going, and tell them how you're planning to get there. Yeah. And I said, and if those plans fall apart, that is fine. But your buddy is there to support you and give you ideas if you're stuck and that kind of thing. And just those conversations, I think, really help because writing is such a solo activity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we need people, we need feedback, we need support while we're working through that. So just I think trying to foster that has been a big goal of mine, and trying to follow, be there for my students and a mentor in that way of like, hey, I'm here. I'll share that story with me. I'll read it over for you, but just keep writing. If nothing else, keep writing. And it doesn't matter if you're writing to be published or you're writing for fun, just write. It will make you feel better, So.
Right.
And I think that's great, and that it's not for me and for anybody I know, it's not linear. Nothing in my life has ever been linear. Anything that's been nothing is linear. You go in 5,000 different directions, and that's okay, with that too. For young people, they think it's just going to be one way and to get to that goal, and no, you're going to weave and go up mountains and go around. You're going to do all kinds of stuff before you get there. So I think that's great. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. This has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
I'm going to go order your book.
Oh, thank you. I'll check out all your books as well.
Yay.